Okay, I think we'll get started for the meeting. I want to welcome everybody to the second general meeting for the school year. Again, I'm Natalie Early, the president of the Atlas, and I think we have Dr. Brewer and two of the APs, Ms. Maldonado and Mr. Signorelli, joining us also tonight for the Q&A. And Lauren Comey has set everything up for us. I want to say thank you to her for setting up all of our Q&As for us, actually, so and all these Zoom calls. I wanted to start off to say that we're still having our membership drive. There's a bit.ly, I don't know how to pronounce it, that's out there that you can click on if you would like to donate, join the PTO. This year is definitely an interesting year, and anything that you can offer, time, financial, anything would be great. Just let us know. We're trying to come up with ideas to to recognize students, recognize teachers and everything through the school year, considering it's a challenge for everybody right now. So anything you can do to help, that would be great. We also, Atlas is launching a new website probably in the next couple days. It's already live, but we're still bridging between DHS homepage and finding Atlas and having our own website when you link over to it. All of the information will transition over there. You'll be able to find everything out about Atlas on our new website. Atlas also has a Schoology group. So in the newsletters, there's instructions on how to join the Atlas Schoology group. And a lot of things that you'll find in the newsletters are also being uploaded into Schoology group and also on Facebook. So you want to make sure that you're following us on Facebook, Instagram, and in the Schoology group. And we're trying to keep everything as current and updated as possible so news and information gets out to you guys. The newsletter highlights, the Drama Club is putting on a night of one act. I think it's been posted on the Facebook page, and there might be something in Schoology about that. I think there's tickets. Will be virtual. They're looking to do these one night acts, and I think it would be very fun to join them and watch what these kids have put together. It'll be virtual, but I think it's going to be a great little show. I think this is tomorrow it might be the last day to order yearbooks at a discounted price, and then the price will go up starting November for sure. I think there's a link in the Atlas newsletter to order yearbooks. Also, anybody who's taking AP exams, next Friday is the last day to register for your AP exams. Dr. Brewer has sent out information, and the newsletter has information. I think Facebook has information on how to register for those exams and pay. Tomorrow night, we are having our first movie night for the school. Tomorrow night will be seniors. We expect there to be no rain by noontime, so tomorrow night should be dry. And it will probably be cool. It's supposed to be very chilly this weekend. So any of your students are joining the movie night tomorrow night, it's for seniors. They're seeing Halloween Town. Make sure they bring a blanket to sit on, blanket to wrap in, hats, gloves, whatever they might need to stay warm. It looks like it's going to be a fun night for them. And I hope they'll enjoy it. In the next 3 Friday nights will be separated between the next 3 classes, starting with the freshmen next week, the juniors the following week, and the weekend before Thanksgiving, the sophomores will have their movie night. And those 3 classes will, at this time, be seeing A Nightmare Before Christmas. So we're looking forward to hosting the kids in the field tomorrow and the next couple Fridays, and hoping they'll have a great time. There'll be food and drinks for them, everything. So hopefully your kids will sign up. I guess that's really it tonight. Dr. Brewer, do you have anything quick to add, or ready to just jump into the Q&A, whatever you want?
Well, I think we can jump in if that's okay. Thank you for making those announcements, and thank you to our Atlas board for their leadership. Definitely a special thanks to Mrs. Comey and her family for supporting all of these town halls that we've hosted. I'm thinking this is probably about the 10th one now that we've had the chance to host. And I want to introduce 3 people who are joining us tonight who are going to be contributing to our evening. In a little bit, John Signorelli is going to talk quite a bit about our plans here to help manage distance learning. And Ms. Maldonado, one of our other assistant principals, is going to give you a briefing about what's being talked about at the school board level in regard to our second semester instructional models and what the possibilities are there. We're going to take time for Q&A in between those, But before we get started on any of that, I want to start with some reflections and celebrations on the first quarter. And the first thing I want to do is actually tell you about the objectives we have tonight. And those 4 things that we hope to accomplish are listed on the screen there. We want to celebrate our successes and identify areas for growth. After the first quarter, we want to empower students to access Dominion High School's workload mitigation strategies that Mr. Signorelli is about to share. We want you to be aware of the 3 instructional models that are under consideration by the school board for second semester. And we want you to evaluate the opportunities and challenges that are associated with each of those instructional models, as you're going to have obviously family choices to make in the weeks and months to come. Before we dive into our specific objectives, let me introduce Ms. Reeser, our school board representative, and just invite her to share some perspectives from her point of view. We're really grateful that she's joined us tonight. She takes tremendous interest in representing us well. Ms. Reeser, thanks for coming tonight.
Hi, Dr. Brewer. Hi, everyone. Thanks for having me. I appreciate your letting me pop into these sessions when it's possible, because it's always really helpful to just listen to what everyone is concerned with firsthand, even though I know that the principals, yourself included, do a really good job of communicating with us about what your community needs. Hearing it firsthand is always much better. And just listening to see what your thoughts are on the different instructional models that are being presented to us as a board. You know, as a board, we have to make these decisions, but the input that you all give has a lot of influence and helps better inform us. And the input that you give to Dr. Brewer is the best way to advocate for what you need, because I know the administration puts a lot of weight in what the principals share. So thank you for having me.
Thank you so much, Ms. Reeser, for joining us. It's all right to do that. Thank you. We can do this without sharing, and we can post this somewhere else. Thanks, everybody, for your patience. So the first thing we want to do is just, again, celebrate a few things that have gone very well for us during the first quarter. Among those things, just want to say that, you know, our teachers, and I've heard a tremendous amount of feedback from you about how hard teachers have been working to implement distance learning in a way that's really meaningful. And I think that our teachers have been able to be in a lot of classrooms. And one of the things that Mr. Signorelli and Ms. Braxton and Ms. Maldonado and I all have at this point in time is we have been joined by about 3,000 classroom observers, because obviously school's now been brought to your house. So we know you get to see firsthand a lot of what's going on in our classes. And I've been able to be in a whole bunch of classes, obviously, some of them for brief periods of time and some of them for very extended periods of time as we begin the evaluation process. I feel really good about the work that our teachers have done to make distance learning a meaningful and positive experience for your Titans. We realize it's not without its challenges. Certainly there are challenges, but we sure appreciate how hard our teachers have worked. And thank you for recognizing that. You've been really, really kind to us about how hard teachers have worked and giving us that feedback. So the implementation of distance learning in a way that's meaningful and effective is a real success for the first quarter, as we approach tomorrow being the last day of this first quarter. Believe it or not, attendance is at an all-time high. We're typically this time of year battling real hard with illnesses that typically occur in the fall to get our students to school at a rate of 96%. This fall, it's obviously, we should be doing better, and we are. We're at 98% pretty much on a daily basis, which is certainly the best we've ever been. So we certainly appreciate your help in making sure that your Titans are logging in and signing on. And we recognize that just because a student is in a meeting, we don't necessarily have their full and undivided attention. So if we discover that engagement isn't as high as attendance, that's the point. And if we discover that engagement needs support, we've had a lot of success in working with parents to engage our students. Ms. Maldonado has led an effort called Titans Connect, where we have some space set aside with great social distancing practices in place to give students an opportunity to connect and remove the barriers that might prevent them from being fully attending and fully engaging in instruction. So Titans Connect is a big success for us. We also just this week have welcomed this month. Earlier this month, we welcomed about 20 students back for some learning for those students who have unique learning needs. And then this week, we invited another 33 students to come back and join us. And not only that, I guess 7 Head Start students. So about 40 new students have joined us this week quite successfully and have gotten in-person instruction. Those are students in our Head Start and English learners. So one of the things we're really, really pleased with is we do have lots of staff members, dozens of staff members at school every day, from folks who are serving food, keeping our building clean, and teaching, and now directly teaching students. And we're really pleased that we have had, with good safety precautions and probably a little bit of luck, but most importantly, good, structured, thoughtful safety precautions. We have had 0 number of cases to this point, and certainly 0 transmission of COVID within the building since the month of August, September, and October. So really, really pleased with that, obviously, and want to keep that streak going. And that includes the fact that we have had 6 different times, of course, when we've had dozens and hundreds of students come into the building under very structured conditions to participate in SAT and PSAT testing, and ACT testing. So those are some things we're really proud of, really excited about, and give us great hope for the future moving forward. Before we move forward, I just want to thank Mrs. Comai for redirecting us here from the earlier grotesque disruptions. Thank you so much, Mrs. Comai, for handling that swiftly and quickly. This time, we had a presentation prepared, but I think we're just in a better place to focus on our presentation. We'll post what I'll do as we get underway is I will post a link that you can go to follow along in the presentation if you would like. And I'll turn it over at this time to Assistant Principal John Signorelli, who's going to begin to tell you a little bit about what we're doing to be responsive to your feedback. Early in the fall here, you shared with us that distance learning was a lot better than it was in the spring. But one of the consequences of that is we swung the pendulum pretty far, and this was really time-consuming, time-demanding, and we needed to improve in the area of consistency in ways that we were communicating. We needed to manage the workload. Our staff's been working really, really hard on that throughout the month of October, and we're pleased to debut for you tonight some specific guidelines, and we'll get information out to you later about where you can find those and reference them at any time. But right now, I'll give you, again, the link in the chat in just a second to the presentation from which Mr. Signorelli is going to begin to present.
All right, there we go. Thanks, Dr. Brewer, and welcome everybody. Again, I'm Assistant Principal John Signorelli. I'm going to be navigating and talking through some documents that we've been working on for several weeks with our teachers and our leadership team and our department chairs in response to feedback that we were receiving, overwhelming feedback really from our school community, you and our students and really our teachers. And one of the things that first came to our attention is that Mondays got to be a lot. And I really think this comes from a good place, and that teachers were trying to make sure they use their instructional time to engage students, interact with students. And they said, hey, what about Monday? Without thinking that a student has 6 other classes with 6 other teachers that might be thinking the same thing. So one of the first things we discussed was what to do with asynchronous Monday. So we developed a document. Again, this is accessible now to the public via our Schoology page. And it's titled Expectations. There's 3 parts to it. The first part is Expectations for Asynchronous Mondays. It's organized into 3 parts. We should, we can, and we should not. So first I'm going to navigate the we should. And here we emphasize the amount of work we were asking students to do. And the first item on here, it says we should assign no more than 25 minutes of work per class. Secondly, in this consideration, we mentioned consider available supports, accessibility for English learners and students with IEPs. And really what I mean by that is we're asking students to work asynchronously And it's really important, given the consideration that you may not be there to support them, and they might be on their own, that the material that we're asking them to access is accessible. We're not introducing new tools that they've never seen before. We're not going to confuse them with the instructions themselves. So that also factors into the time. We also thought it was really important to say here, teachers should feel empowered not to introduce new content, and also feel empowered not to present new assignments. So we're really explicit here that it's okay for teachers not to have new material introduced and also not to present new assignments. We say that teachers should encourage students to complete work already assigned. So those things we should be doing on Monday, things that we can do where there's some flexibility. So teachers do have flexibility to introduce new content, not assess new content summatively, but to introduce new content. Also, teachers can present assignments that reinforce previously taught content from the week, and they can formatively or summatively assess students on previously taught content. And we say here as well, teachers can formatively assess students on new content. What that means is they can introduce a concept briefly and ask students to do a formative assessment. And what that does is it tells the teacher, I asked students to navigate this new material, and it lets me know if they understood it or don't understand it and who I need to support when we get back into class. So that's in the we can, there's some flexibility in that regard. Some no-nos, the we should not column says we should not introduce new content and have students do a summative assessment on the new content. So what we don't want to do is introduce new content that day without any support from the teacher and then have students do a summative assessment that goes in the gradebook and counts towards their grade. So that's a big no-no. The next one I call the no surprises clause, and we heard a lot about this early on. So teachers should not post an assignment they've not previously communicated about with students. So what we were running into previously is a student would wake up and they'd hop into Schoology and there's an assignment they didn't know was coming that wasn't discussed. So again, I call it the no surprises clause. If we're going to post something on Monday, the students need to know it's going to be there and to look for it. And also we shouldn't be requiring students to meet synchronously. Again, a teacher can make themselves available for office hours, or a student can make an appointment with the teacher, but we don't want a teacher saying to class, hey, you've got to meet me at this time on Monday. So we started with our asynchronous Mondays in the second page of this. And again, you'll have access to this. You already do have access to this on our forward-facing Schoology page. The next page here is workload management guidelines. So again, we're organized in 3 columns. The first one is amount of work. And here we say assignment should take no longer than 25 minutes. In our policy, it does say assignments in AP, DE, dual enrollment, and honors courses may require more time. Largely what we're asking students to do should take no longer than 25 minutes. In terms of assignments, we want to make sure that no assignment should be due on Saturdays, Sundays, or holidays. So teachers should not be posting a due date of Sunday night at midnight, or again, if Monday's a holiday, student holidays and teacher work days, they can ask students to have items due on those days. Also, don't want any assignments due on the first A or B day following an extended break, specifically Thanksgiving, winter, and spring breaks. That includes honors AP and dual enrollment. So a student shouldn't come back from an extended break in which they should be resting and spending time with their family and have a massive assignment due on that, or any assignment due on that first A day or B day back. I want to make sure that students are taking that time to rest and to recharge and not be burdened by work that's due immediately afterwards. We're asking that submissions are due at the beginning of the synchronous class meeting. We liken this more to an event we were in in-person school. If you had an assignment to do, you'd walk into your English class and you submit that assignment that day. And just in regards to that, Schoology defaults. Let me say the next thing first. We're asking teachers to put all submissions, make them visible in Schoology. What that means is we're asking teachers to create assignments in Schoology so they appear on the Schoology calendar. In regards to due times, Schoology defaults to 11:59 p.m. So what I'm telling you again, the previous bullet is that assignments are due at the beginning of class. So you may have something that says it's due 11:59 p.m. It was due that day during the synchronous class meeting. In terms of assessment, again, in order to make sure that students weren't overburdened with assessments, again, really early on, we got messages from folks that, I had 5 tests today. I got up on my asynchronous Monday and I had 5 tests. And again, I think it comes from the right place. I think it comes from teachers not wanting to use that valuable instructional time to assess students. So we shifted to Mondays. But in order for us to really make sure that the number of assessments on Monday were limited, again, the third part here says we'll follow an assessment schedule in which only certain departments are permitted to have a summative assessment due on any given Monday. And I'll come back to that in just a moment. The last item here, a general instructional framework. It says right on here, one thing that we were running into in terms of consistency with Schoology is just that Google Meet links were sometimes all over the place, not easily accessible, and that was frustrating to students. So I just mentioned here that Google Meet links should be easily accessible on the course landing page in Schoology. Again, as I navigate through teachers' Schoology pages, that is what I'm seeing. So very pleased with that. Instructional framework, scope and sequence. This is a big one. So we have less time. There are less class meetings. Class time for instruction is shorter. And I know LCPS has worked to pare down the scope and sequence. And we've been talking about making sure this happens for a couple of weeks now. And we're at a point now and leading into the beginning of the second quarter that staff at this point should have significantly pared down the scope and sequence of all courses to effectively plan for engaging instruction, provide feedback, and focus on wellness. Again, I think the feeling of being overburdened or having an extraordinary amount of work to do, again, I think that comes from the right place. I think it comes from teachers being passionate about their content, not wanting to shortchange kids, wanting to make sure that the course is still rigorous. And I think they're battling as well with, I don't know what to let go. I want to make sure that we get through all of this material. And the fact of the matter is, given the circumstances and the time, it's going to be extraordinarily challenging, if even possible, for teachers to navigate all of the course content effectively, dive as deep as they need to, provide the kind of feedback they need to, and really assess student learning, given the less time that we have and also the format that we're functioning in. So again, LCPS has noticed that, and content supervisors, pared down curriculum, and we're asking teachers and teams of teachers to do the same thing. So moving into the second quarter, the expectation is that we'll be starting with a much more manageable amount of work and much more manageable number of topics that we're expecting teachers and teams of teachers to cover. Expectations for the synchronous session. And this is something that we've been communicating throughout the year. The 3 points that we've highlighted since August are: in a synchronous session, interaction is a must. There are lots of ways to interact: teacher to student interaction, student to student interaction, interacting verbally, interacting in the chat, using a variety of tools to interact. But there's got to be some level of interaction. There's expectation that a teacher isn't having students log into the Meet and it's just teacher talk for the whole time. We know how challenging this environment is, and that makes it more challenging to engage for students. Also, an expectation that there's a coherent structure to the class. Again, this goes for in-person learning as well, but there are a lot of different tools at our disposal and a lot of different modalities that we can use in this environment that includes synchronous work, asynchronous work, small group work, whole group instruction, and then again, learning lab. So we're expectation that we're in a class that there's a coherent structure that's present. And then at the center should be higher level thinking, authentic challenging problems, and essential skills. Also have a note here about learning lab. Again, learning lab should take place for about 20 minutes each synchronous block. And this includes teachers working with small groups of students to either provide extension or support. And during this is also time for providing feedback, and also reteaching is a fantastic time to review an assessment with a student or to prepare for reassessment as well. So that should take place for about 20 minutes per block. So that's the 3 portions of one of the documents that you'll see. Again, it's divided into 3 sections: asynchronous Mondays, workload management guidelines, and then our instructional framework. What you'll also see in the same page, and again, we'll communicate with you about where to find these items in our Schoology page, but the other item that's linked in there now is our Monday summative assessment schedule. So the Monday summative assessment schedule is organized in 2 columns by department, and it very clearly lays out which departments can have a summative assessment due on any given Monday. So I hope when we're able to provide access to these documents to you, again, you already have access, difficult to help you get there without being able to share the screen right now, but we'll make sure to communicate this with you. So you'll be able to view these and have an understanding of, it's Monday, November 9th. My students should only have summative assessments in science, English, world languages, and fine arts. So it's organized in a way that I hope is really, really easy for you guys to navigate. Again, we're hoping that that's something that's concrete that we can follow that will limit the number of assessments that students are doing on Monday. So again, we know that there's more feedback for us, and I hope that the work that we've been doing and have done in preparing for the second quarter, that what I've explained here tonight really does come to life and helps to reduce the stress that we have on our students and our teachers, and honestly, for families as well, and helping students navigate this environment. But again, this is in response to what we've heard from our school community. And we know that you'll continue providing us feedback, and we're going to listen to you. So thank you so much. I hope that was helpful. Again, that was a lot of teacher talk right there. But again, we'll make sure that you can access these documents. Again, you can access them already. We just need to point you in the right direction. So.
Thank you, Mr. Signorelli, and thanks, Ms. Kilmott, for managing our sound button. Great work. I just want to go back to, shame on me, I skipped slide 5, I believe it is. I was responsible to cover very, very briefly. Mr. Signorelli made a couple comments about this. As one of the other pieces of feedback that he mentioned is it's been clear to us that our pace and the amount of work that we've been asking your Titans to do has been pretty overwhelming. So we've asked our teachers here, as we turn the page from the first quarter to the second, to again review carefully the guidance they've received from their instructional supervisors, and to dig even deeper into the curriculum to figure out where the primary areas of focus are and place the emphasis on those fundamental and essential skills. We just want to be honest and say, we're doing that understanding that there could be some impact on how we perform in the spring and on SOLs and APs. We don't know what those tests are even going to look like at this point in the year. We're not going to intentionally not prepare our students to do well on those assessments, but we do have to recognize we're certainly not in this environment. The resources just aren't there in terms of time and accessibility to our students to treat the curriculum the same way we have in the past. So we're going to do the best we can with that, but we're going to put our focus on meeting the needs of your Titans more prominently than worrying right now about what impact that might have on test scores. Of course, that doesn't suggest that we'll enter into a place of reckless abandon. We're going to pause for just a second and take some of the questions that you have. And Mr. Long, thanks for the question there about when this will go into effect. That's a perfect place for us to start. Going into Q&A, you have prepared some questions for us in advance, and we're going to refer to those, but let's take this one first. Mr. Long asked a really good question. The guidelines that Mr. Signorelli just shared with you, when are those going into effect? Those have been under development over the past 2 or 3 or 4 weeks during the month of October. And so our teachers they have a head start on you about knowing that these are the expectations that we've agreed to as a staff. They're pretty consistent with the other high schools. I had a high school principals meeting earlier this week just to make sure we're pretty aligned, and we are. And so yes, we understand that what's happened thus far only reflects a partial implementation of the expectations just shared. And you should see, as we turn the page and turn the corner to the second quarter, more consistent practice with the expectations that Mr. Signorelli just shared. So we definitely want to move away from kids having a lot to do, for example, on weekends and definitely on holidays. A couple of the questions that you asked that are really appropriate in advance, that are really appropriate for us to answer right now, a lot of them have to do with grades. How often should we expect to see grades in the grade book updated? What we've asked teachers to do is update them every Monday. Now, when I say that, I mean we want them to hopefully update them from Monday for the previous week, like 2 previous weeks. So for example, this coming Monday on November 2nd is probably a poor example because it's the end of a quarter. Everything needs to be updated. But on a typical Monday, we would be asking teachers to be sure that for any assessment taken more than a week ago, that it's documented in the Phoenix gradebook, the SIS gradebook. That's the official gradebook that we use, of course. And so, and that's the LCPS assessment and grading standard is 6 days. So that's 6 business days. So that's where we want to be. Now, that being said, I want to tell you that as principal, one of the things that I realize is a huge role for me right now is to be a manager of something that we've begun to, I guess, not so affectionately call the stress monster. If you're feeling the stress monster in your home, I assure you the teachers are feeling that stress monster even more. It's been a really, really challenging time to be a teacher, and our teachers are working really, really hard. So I've asked them to prioritize a few things over making sure that their grades are done. Not that grading and keeping that current is not a priority. It certainly is, but it's not a first level priority. I have 3 other first level priorities that I've asked them to give attention to. One of them, of course, is being prepared on a daily basis to offer high quality instruction to your Titans. A second one is I want them, and this one isn't particularly time consuming, but it is timely and quite important. And that is we need to maintain really careful and accurate records of attendance so that we can, again, address issues of non-engagement where they occur. We don't want students to be missing classes repeatedly without you being aware. And then thirdly, we've asked them to make a significant investment in the lives of the Titans that they are connecting to in their advisory class, so that we have invested significantly. At least one adult is working very, very hard to get to know your Titan on a really personal level. So that's a little bit there about what to expect in timeliness from grades. We hope they're about a week behind at any given time, and only a week behind. But in reality, we recognize how challenging this is. So we've made this a second level, not a bottom level, but a second level priority for teachers, understanding that those other things really need to come first. Schoology updates, another question, great question that was asked. Can Schoology work so that once my Titan turns in his essay, that comes off the to-do list? Unfortunately, Schoology, at least as it exists right now, doesn't work that way. It just doesn't. It's not capable of working that way. So we apologize. We wish it could. It just doesn't do that. Some teachers are not using Schoology to list all of their assignments, and that's a really important piece of feedback that Mr. Signorelli just addressed. We're asking them to do that. That takes additional time. For example, if they're using a platform to give students assignments and work to do in math, we use a program called Alex. In English, we use a program called No Red Ink. There's no way to just connect and sync those programs with the Schoology calendar. So teachers need to make the assignment in Alex or No Red Ink, and then they need to go to the Schoology calendar and place it there. I just bring that up to say the reason why you don't always see those things, and we're trying to make sure you and more importantly, your Titans always see all of the assignments in Schoology. The reason is it's a double, it's just a second piece of effort that the teacher needs to invest, and time for all of us, of course, is finite. So we're working toward that goal of making sure the Schoology calendar is a complete and comprehensive list of submissions, what we call submissions that are due for, an assessment. So that's one of the things we want to do. All right, I'm going to bounce back and forth here between the pre-submitted questions and those here in the chat. Is there any way to distribute grades so as to allow class participation and homework to weigh as much as summative tests? It seems unfair and very stressful that summative tests weigh so much. Yes, there is a new grading policy in LCPS that we're all adjusting to just as we make this transition, of course, to the grading policy. We didn't anticipate needing to make such a transition to distance learning, but the policy does call for grades to be based, 80% of the grades to be based on major summative assessments, and the remaining 20%, up to 20% of the grade to be based on minor summative assessments. So we are moving into a place where we're not grading efforts and participation, we are grading achievement. And that is an adjustment for us, but it is a policy, of LCPS, and we're working toward, implementing it successfully in a way that it benefits students and helps them learn and demonstrate their learning. Mental health alleviation for teachers also on that list. Yeah, we're trying. I promise you, Ms. Banks. Thank you. You guys have been great about being really supportive of our teachers, and very encouraging. And we recognize that Mr. Signorelli, Ms. Maldonado, Jamie Braxton, our other assistant principal, and I, one of the big jobs we're trying to carry right now is to pick up that stress monster and move him off of our teachers' shoulders. So we're trying really, really hard to be stress alleviators. That's become a big part of our responsibility. And if you have any ideas for us, please don't hesitate to reach out to us. Let's see. Yep, as far as the grading policy is concerned, grades, no individual grade should count more than 25%. Ms. Maldonado, Mr. Signorelli, Ms. Braxton, and I are all spending the next several days auditing our teachers' grade books in a friendly and kind way, trying to make sure that we support their implementation of the grading policy, because it does require a shift in effort on their part. So yeah, we want to make sure and go through and help them see if there's a particular assignment that's counting 40, 50% of the grade, that wouldn't be appropriate. So let's see. Yeah, 70%, that won't be able to stand that way. Obviously, that's not concurrent, that's not consistent with the policy. So Ms. Maldonado, Mr. Signorelli, if you can catch Mrs. Rose's question. I didn't see that one. I don't see it right now. Or Mrs. Rose, if you don't mind putting it back in there. Yeah, that is true. Homework can be assigned as a summative assessment, can't account more than 10%. So yeah, that is I think some teachers maybe have found some ways that they feel like that's a practice that they want to include. It's definitely a very teacher by teacher effort. Good question here about what key performance indicators are being tracked during distance learning. And the answer to that question is we'll be tracking everything, but it's still a little bit early for us to track specific achievement issues. So, at the end of the first quarter, we'll compare our grade distributions from this first quarter to first quarters for the last 15 years and see where we stand. A lot of factors play a role here, a changing grading policy, certainly, and big change, obviously, in distance learning. So, all right, Mrs. Rose, that when our kids had missed a login or had tech problems, we would get a notice that indicated, but also listed it as excused. How are you measuring tardies or absences? Are you including the excused or just unexcused in your report? So at the when you get a report card, you will see a list of just absences, full day absences from school, and tardies to school, which is defined as being late to advisory. So those numbers on the report card are not distinguished by excused or unexcused. And frankly, our attendance secretary works very hard to make sure that we're not marking students absent if they had connectivity issues. We don't want to do that, obviously. We're only marking students absent when they have not logged in at all, they have not made the effort to, or they're not able to because of an illness or something else that's happening in the family. Yeah, for our school report, referring to your school report of attendance. I'm so sorry, Ms. Rose. I don't know if Ms. Maldonado takes good care of us with being our primary point of contact for attendance there. Sorry about that. Let's see. I second Lori's question. Very short summatives don't leave much room for error. Yeah. Oh, what does 98% attendance refer to? Thank you, Mrs. Rose. That's very helpful. So 98% attendance means that 98% of students show up to school for at least part of or the entire day of school. So that particular statistic means 2% of our student body, or about 30 students or less, are completely absent from school on any given day. So that's really good. Yeah, we should have intervened there. Let's see. Let me get a couple more off the sheet, and then we want to talk obviously about what's coming next. So I want to talk screen time for just a second and say screen time obviously is an issue we want to pay close attention to. That's why we want to manage workload. And I want to just say the CDC says the average teenager these days obviously spends 6.5 hours on a screen per day. Our school day is, generally speaking, a good 4 hours of that screen time. So we're trying to be really focused on making sure that the workload per class per day is 25, 30 minutes or less. And that can be challenged sometimes, obviously, in our dual enrollment, AP, and honors classes. But again, those are the time guidelines. Now, what that means is Monday through Friday, we're pretty much taking up all that screen time the CDC says is present. One thing we definitely want to encourage you to do is everything you possibly can to encourage your sons and daughters not to add additional screen time outside of what they're doing for school to the extent possible. We're going to try to be as reasonable as we can about this and try to find a way to adequately provide your sons and daughters with the educational opportunities they need without having screen time that exceeds that. That's for sure. And of course, when I say it's 6.5 hours, they're not suggesting that's recommended. As they're just saying that's what the status quo was coming into our COVID crisis. I'm going to turn from questions about distance learning at this time because we don't have a lot of time left. I want to move to our plans, the school board's plans, and how the timeline about how this will play out for second semester. And so I want to point you back to the presentation that we sent out a little bit ago, and I'll put it back in the chat if you want to open it up now. But we're going to start on slide number 10, and Ms. Maldonado is going to talk about 3 instructional models that are currently under consideration by Ms. Reeser and the school board for implementation at the secondary level, beginning with the second semester. Ms. Maldonado, and Ms. Coma, do you mind unmuting her? Thank you. Perfect.
Thank you, Dr. Brewer. As your families get ready to make a decision in the upcoming weeks, we wanted to present these options to you so that they were a little bit more clear, so that you can make the best decision for your family. So the first option that we have on the table is the separate hybrid and distance learning classes. So essentially having 2 different programs running separately. That would mean we have a couple of opportunities, and then we also have challenges. So to help you understand some of the opportunities and the things that would be great about this model would be students will get back into the building, increased support for the learners that need that, social emotional support directly available by counselors, by teachers, by other staff members, teachers and students familiar with the instructional model that they were used to prior to COVID. Some of the challenges, however, are massive schedule changes, as we have a lot of singleton classes, so we would definitely have to separate those. And if it's just one teacher teaching that, then there'd be some students that would lose access to several courses that they either need or that they would like to take. And then significant disruptions in case that it would be a result if we had a community spread of COVID. So those are some of the challenges that we have identified in that first option. The second option is concurrent hybrid and distance learning, meaning students who have, or parents who have selected hybrid, the students would be in the building physically with the teacher, and that teacher would also at the same time be teaching the students that have selected distance learning, meaning those students would be on a Google Meet, and the teacher would have the technology available to have access to those students, but she would also be teaching, or he would be teaching the students in person in the building. So opportunities here, obviously some of the students would be in the building, increased support again, and then we keep a close eye on the social emotional support directly for the students. Challenges for this, it's a new model, which would mean that our staff would be teaching two sets of students at the same time, some on screen and some in person. This can pose some staffing challenges as well, as we may have to shift some staffing. And then again, we can see some disruption to learning as a result of a community spread if that were to happen. The third option that's on the table right now is remain 100% distance learning for most students. And again, this is one that most of you are familiar with, which is at the model that we're using at the moment. Opportunities for this: it minimizes the risk for community spread, provides maximum instructional continuity in that case. And staff and students are both familiar with this model now. As we're getting used to this, we're building the resources and the strategies to teach our students in this model. Some of the challenges that we're seeing now with this model is lack of personal engagement. And again, we don't have eyes on the social emotional well-being of the students. So those are some challenges for option 3, to remain 100% distance learning. We just wanted to clear some of those options up for you as you navigate those choices with your family, and we are sure that you'll make the best choice for your family at the moment. I'll turn it back over to Dr. Brewer.
Thanks, Ms. Maldonado. I want to go back up to a timeline. If you're following in the presentation, this timeline is on slide 11. Just so you can know what to anticipate from the school board here as we move forward. November 10th, on that Tuesday meeting, the school board, as I understand it, is going to consider making a recommendation and taking a vote to implement hybrid learning as the model for second semester. And the recommended model is number 2. So we're going to come back to option 2 in just a second. They're going to vote, as I understand it, if I understand it correctly, they'll vote on November 10th to say that's the model we're going to utilize. Then the next day, a survey is going to open to ask you if you want to be part of that, if you want your Titan to be part of that hybrid model that is up for possible implementation. During that window of time, one thing I should have put on the timeline here is that all middle schools and high schools will host another town hall during that window of time. And on the results of the survey and gathered feedback from you, we'll consider an actual decision to implement the hybrid model. And if they do make that decision, it's anticipated that that hybrid model would go into full implementation on January 21st. There is a slide down here at the bottom, number 15. I'm not going to talk about it a great deal because this would become the topic of the next town hall meeting. But this is what LCPS is talking about when we talk about option 2. In option 2, we're talking about the teacher concurrently teaching the students who are on distance learning, just like they are now, but also at the very same time teaching the students who are present in the classroom for in-person learning. The points that we would like to emphasize tonight about this is a complicated model. We're going to do a hybrid model. It is the one that we as high school principals overwhelmingly recommend over option number 1. Option number 1, pure distance learning for some students and pure hybrid learning for others. I'm going to use the word impossible. It would be impossible for us to do that in a way that you would find satisfactory because we have in the vicinity, all high schools have in the vicinity of 90, for example, this is one challenge with that model, 90 singleton classrooms. So we could not possibly teach those with our current level of staffing. We'd lose 90, some subset of 90 classes across the school because we couldn't teach both of them. We can teach them concurrently in option 2. It's challenging. The big challenge with that is we do need our entire staff to come back to work. One of my worries is that we may have a lot of teachers who need to use leave under a circumstance like that, family medical leave. We might have to, that's a big challenge. That is a system we need to address. And then of course, the other one is it's a yet another instructional platform for us to work through. And again, we'll talk about how we believe we can make that work when we come back for our next town hall in November. But the bottom line idea is that we're teaching some students who are in the room, roughly, let's say about a third of the students who would be in the classroom, and then 2/3 who would be coming in on a daily basis. When they're not in the classroom, they would be coming in as distance learners, and they'd be taught at the same time by a single teacher. That's a challenging model. It's a very challenging model for the teacher. But we got to do the best thing for our students. And if that's the best thing that we can do, we're going to gear up and get ready to do it. So the questions that we have had submitted in advance, let's see, that are related to the future of hybrid learning. That slide is one of our questions was what does concurrent hybrid model look like? And my best answer to that right now is to take a look at that slide. Which one did I say it is? It's slide number 15. Again, I talked about it the best I could with the time we have tonight, but we'll talk a ton more about that if the board selects that model moving forward. Spacing and distancing guidelines, is a question. A lot of talk about we using 3-foot circles, 6-foot radius, 8-foot radius. I'll be honest and say those are all decisions that will be reached by the board and implemented at a school level. We'll implement what we're asked to implement, and what it does basically is whatever size circle we decide to use impacts the classroom capacity in every room in the building. Right now, the model that we're using, most of our classrooms, the classroom capacity is 8 people. Or 8 students and the teacher. So, that's just what it is right now. If we make smaller the radius that we want to put around students, then obviously we can put a few more students in the room. Right now, we're not in a position where we are advising that it's a good idea to bring back, a full classroom full of students. And then with the option to opt in or out of transportation, you certainly, somebody asked about transportation in advance. I just want to say, if you opt into hybrid, you certainly have the option to drive your Titan to school, or if they're a junior or senior and they can drive themselves, they could drive themselves. We don't want them driving, the neighborhood, but they could drive themselves. We're still going to plan for bus transportation, of course, so that we have that in place for everyone and create an equitable learning environment. So let's go to the chat here. If the number of students requesting hybrid is overwhelming, how will students be selected to participate, or do you see a situation where all kids can go hybrid? That's a great question. Definitely a school board level question. And I would just say, Ms. Gorbach, based upon the number of students, 1,000 whose parents indicated a preference to come in for hybrid learning, if that does not change substantially, we expect all the students to be able to come 2 days a week. That number would have to increase a lot for us at Dominion High School to be in a place where we couldn't accommodate everybody. So I think we probably will be pretty good. We have a smaller student body, relatively speaking, than some other schools, 1,500 kids, and a newer facility. So we should be pretty good. That'll obviously be, questions like that are going to depend on where the board ultimately feels we are in terms of classroom capacities based on how much space they believe it's best for each student to have around them and in between them. Concurrent means that kids in the classroom are on headphones and a computer, basically distance learning in the classroom and not interacting with the teacher differently than the distance learning kids. No, I don't think that's what that means. Certainly the teacher, what makes the concurrent teaching model challenging is that the teacher needs to be able to give a lot of, what we'd like to be undivided attention to students. Roughly 2/3 of the class is going to be in a Google Meet, and then 1/3 of the students are going to be in the room. So obviously the school administration's recommendation is that that not be simply 7 or 8 kids come into the room and they're on a Google Meet, just like they would be in your living room and in your dining room or your office or the bedroom, like they are now. We're going to have to move forward in our ability to deliver instruction in order to do more than we're doing right now, which is that Google Meet model. That's what the aspiration of our Department of Instruction is, that we can develop the technology and the capacity to do that work so that students in the classroom aren't merely on the Google Meet like everybody else. I'm going to tell you, as the instructional leader, I see this as a real challenge for our teachers. They've risen to the occasion for other challenges, and we certainly will do everything that we can to empower them to do so. At a minimum, of course, we hope to be able to maintain the standard of educational experience that they have now and make it better, obviously, for those who are able to come into the building. So we're going to try. If you look on slide 15, it says really, really clearly, we're going to try to make that learning experience equitable and engaging for students who are in the classroom and for those who are from distance. So there are ways to do it. We're going to work as hard as we can toward it. Many schools in the area are implementing a hybrid model, and one of the things we're going to do at Dominion High School to prepare for that is we're going to go visit some of them. We've identified some that have been doing this or about to start before we are, so we can go see firsthand what some of the best practices are and what some of the challenges might be. I'm the kind of guy who likes to get the scouting report and make sure we make adjustments. Dr. Williams stated if 70% of students chose hybrid, it most likely would be too many. Dominion High School was at 64% on the summer survey. Remember that Dr. Williams' statement was made on behalf of 93 schools. We are one of the, we have as far as schools are concerned, we have a school that's under enrolled. So our capacity is somewhere around 1,700 students. We only have 1,500. Our adjusted capacity for COVID is 660 students. So we have 1,000 students who said they wanted to come to school over the summer. So we could grow that by almost 300 more kids and still be under the 660. So it'd be tight, but we could grow quite a bit. So Dr. Williams, of course, he's got to make a statement that says in general what would happen across schools. We can probably deal with closer to 80% or so at Dominion simply because our school population is under enrolled ever so slightly. All right, it is 8 o'clock and we appreciate you coming. We don't want to cut off your questions, but we certainly appreciate you coming tonight, and we want to honor some other members of our community who also want to get some information about this. So we're going to shift to another meeting at this time, but we certainly want to encourage you to reach out to us if you have other questions. I hope this has been informative. It does feel a little bit rushed, at least to me, and I'm sorry if it feels that way to you too. Summary, before we go, first thing I would say is for distance learning, we're trying to make the adjustments Mr. Signorelli discussed earlier to make distance learning rewarding and engaging, but manageable. And then secondly, looking ahead, the school board has some important decisions to make about a transition to the hybrid model. They're considering 2 types of models, and we as school staff are highly recommending the second model, where we would teach students in this concurrent model. We realize you need more information about that before you make a decision about whether or not you want your Titan to participate in that. The first thing you need to know is the school board going to settle on that model? And they'll make that decision, as I understand it, on November 10th. Subsequent to that, we're going to have another town hall that we'll dedicate completely toward foreseeing just how that concurrent model is going to work out. And we appreciate you coming tonight. Many thanks again to Mrs. Comey for setting this up, and then go Titans.